So welcome back everyone to the third and final part of the Caddy engine pull. Sorry about the weird camera distortion going on. My phone does some weird things when you try and zoom in from a long way away, I guess. But just some last minute things here before we can actually start to lift the engine out. Got the hood support rod out of the way, and we've got some kind of a lifting chain set up and trying to position the tractor in here whilst fighting with the garage door up above that isn't very high, as well as dealing with ice and snow outside. Makes it challenging to do any kind of work with any kind of precision. So as I mentioned previously, the fact that this car is an automatic transmission gasoline engine, the transmission, in my experience, appears to be quite a bit larger than a manual transmission, which is true for most manufacturers, as I've noticed with the trucks as well. So it makes it more difficult to get the engine out of the car. So we thought we had all of the mounts and everything undone, and started to lift with the tractor here, as you can see. But it was quite a struggle to get the transmission clear of the frame rail, as well as the intake manifold, and the throttle body is actually underneath the rain tray when the engine is installed properly. So you can't even just lift the engine straight up, and on these cars, same as most of the other ones, you can't remove the rain tray either without cutting it out. So between the transmission being hooked under the frame rail and the manifold being hooked under the rain tray, it is very challenging to get it out of the car without damaging either the engine or the car. Now again, in this case, we don't really care too much about the car itself, or sorry, that's not right. We do care about the car because we want to use it. We don't care too much about the engine. It's a gas automatic and it doesn't even run or anything, so not too concerned about potential damage to it. I mean, I don't want to destroy anything because, all parts are usable by someone. But the bigger thing is not to damage the frame rails or the rad support or the rain tray on this front of this car, because that's the one we're going to use for the Caddy. So the idea with the Caddy would be to have the chassis as close to mint as possible when it's complete. And the less dents and dings you have, the easier it is to do body work on the outer surfaces. As it is, you can see on the right side there, there's a dent just below where the headlight goes that we're going to have to tin tap out a bit and get it prepped to be able to paint, because I'm not 100% sure yet what front bumper we're going to use. But if that part of the body is exposed, then it needs to be as close to perfect as we can get. So now, of course, we're working into the dark here. We got the lights on the tractor going, which don't really help much, looking right at the bucket. But then we got the flashlights going, fighting with some last minute electrical and cables, just making sure it's out of the way before we try and go up from there. Yeah, it's starting to come there now, and basically what I had to be doing, it's not really shown in the frame, is I had to be on the passenger side of the engine, the front of the engine really, with a big pry bar hooked in the camshaft gear to try and tip the engine as it came up. And we realized there we forgot to take the speedometer cable out of the transmission, so that's what we're fighting with now. And then back to holding the engine while we go up. And with that, we're pretty much clear. Roll the car out of the way. Grab a scrap tire to set the engine down on. And with that, the engine pull is complete, more or less. There's just a little bit of work left to do pulling parts on the engine. and also a bit of work to do, obviously, on the car to convert it from gas to diesel. It is out, finally. So just to kind of finish up the engine removal here, I'm just going to go over the engine quickly and remove any mounts and brackets that might be useful for the actual Caddy project, and then this engine is probably just going to sit outside. It's not worth much, it's just a 1.8 gas. I pulled the injection system off because I have somebody that will buy it. I don't even know if the engine's seized or not. Oh, no. Not seized, so maybe I'll at least tarp it so that it's not completely scrapped. It is an automatic transmission. I don't know what shape it's in, but it might be worth something to somebody. So I'm just gonna pull all of the mounts off. A couple of them I already got the transmission mount from the far driver's side end and the front ride support mount. And I want to get the passenger side frame mount off, and I don't think I'm going to bother with the differential mount because the manual transmissions are completely different, so I don't think they have that third mount. But nevertheless, let's see if we can turn this a bit and get going. Looks like somebody already tried to take this mount off. The bolts are loose from the block, but the mount still won't move, so. Let's see if we can get it off. We gotta pull the lower timing cover, which is not exactly nice. It means I gotta deal with undoing the pulleys, at least on the crankshaft, which is a pain, but I think the other bolts for the mount are underneath the plastic cover and you can't get to them without taking the cover off, so. It's actually kind of good that I'm taking these pulleys off because they're the same as what's on my Mark IIs, so the more pulleys I have with lower mileage on them, the better. Get more choices when they're worn out to pick from. Pretty snug fit, especially if there's any rust, so you gotta kind of work it back and forth a bit, and there we go. Again, pulleys are pretty much like new, which is awesome. Usually I'm working with ones that are worn down so paper thin that the belt won't tension anymore. The water pump is garbage, but I'll take those pulleys off as well. And I guess we might as well do that before we try and take the timing cover off. fourth automatic transmission mount off anyways, even though I probably won't be able to use it for anything. Might help me with some fabrication in the future, so I'll keep it. Oh, easy, easy. Hold on a sec. So with the front end of the engine mount off and the pulleys out of the way there now, taking a look at the transmission mount on the back side, the fourth mount that I had spoke about previously that is not normal for most of these cars. Like I said, we won't be using any of this drivetrain, but when it comes to trying to fit the 1.9 liter mechanical turbo diesel into this car we just took the engine out of, all the engine mounts that we can get off of this gas engine will make it easier to try and mount the diesel into the gas engine bay. And like I said before, it has been done many times before by others. It hasn't necessarily been done very much with a convertible front end. Again, like I mentioned before as well, normally when people do a front end swap for a Caddy, they're using a 4-door Rabbit. Again, gas or diesel doesn't matter because they made Caddies in both gas and diesel. But the frame structure for a convertible is substantially different than a Rabbit because, of course, there's no permanent roof. So basically the purpose of this last bit of time spent here is just trying to take anything off of the engine that I was thinking might be universal or could be beneficial either to the Caddy itself or to any of my other older Volkswagens, or even just like the tractor or something, like to have that bracket that's sticking up towards the pulley. That's like an alternator style bracket. So if you have an alternator that's a similar size, you can use that bracket and the special toothed adjuster bolt that goes with it, and then voila, you've got a adjustable alternator bracket for anything you want to use it on. Right now I'm trying to undo the main bolts that hold that entire bracket down the side of the engine. In the case of the gas, it's holding the water pump and the alternator and the AC if it has it, and then the power steering at the bottom. Or in the case of the diesel, the injection pump sits right where that arm is sticking up towards the chain. And then again, you've got the alternator a little further down, and AC if it has it, which I have a couple of Mark II diesels that had AC. And then same as before, power steering on the bottom. And again, like I said previously, we're going to get rid of the power steering altogether for the Caddy. I don't want anything to do with it. V-belts are enough of a hassle as it is for alternator and whatnot. So the nice thing about the 1.9 liter turbo diesel out of the Mark III Golf is its serpentine belt for alternator and water pump. And crankshaft, I guess. The power steering is a V-belt. So again, we're just going to get rid of that and hopefully use the manual rack that's in the old Caddy currently, provided that it's in good enough shape. It's been out in the weather for quite some time now. So there we go. We got the large cast bracket moving now, but of course old engine, really old, and probably never been apart, so a little bit of prying on the backside, as well as wiggling the bracket on the front, and you just work it out of the cast. Again, we're trying not to break anything, otherwise it's all just wasted time. And putting most of the bolts back in their existing holes. Again, if we need the bolts for the brackets, then you just come back to the engine and you know exactly where they are, instead of trying to keep them with the bracket and they don't stay in, or you're putting them in a container or a bag or whatever. I always like to put as many of the bolts and nuts back on exactly where they came from. That way, again, if you're ever putting it back together, or if you need those specific bolts for a bracket, you just go right to where that bracket is supposed to be mounted, and there you go, you got the bolts. What I might do with this engine later on that I should have done with those other convertibles that we scrapped was take all of the timing gears and belt and whatnot off, because those can be used for a lot of different things as well. Mitchell and I were part of the high school robotics team for basically our whole high school careers, and something I always wanted to do was build a robot that uses timing belts as the tracks, but then of course you have to have enough gears to make the track supports and the drive for it. The options are endless for what you can do with universal parts. Basically, it doesn't matter what they're off of. If you have the tools and the skills to make it into something else, then you can do anything you want. Likely what'll happen with this engine sometime in the near future, this season hopefully, is we'll just pull anything else off of it that we think is of value, and maybe throw a quick ad up and just see if there's anybody that needs any specific parts. And then it's just going to go in the trunk of one of the other cars that are going to scrap to get a little more money out of it. And that way it's out of our hair as well. Things like all the rubber coolant hoses, I don't know that I would put them on a car that I'm driving normally, as they're, old and could let you down, but they're great for other things too, either for something like a tractor, or even just to cut a piece out of, to put around like a cable or a wire to protect it from being cut or scrubbed by metal, or you put it through a hole and there's no grommet, or whatever the case may be. And so just finishing off with the alternator bracket I spoke of there, I think that loop above, which is the supposed to be one of the engine lifting points, I think the mounting to get that bracket off is hidden behind the backside tin splash cover for the timing belt. So the only way to get that chunk off later will be to actually pull the timing belt and all the gears, and then you can remove that tin cover behind the socket there, and that'll allow you to take the rest of that bracket off, which again, that's useful as well. Even if you don't have a Volkswagen engine, you can either bolt it up or weld it onto anything, and then you've got a rated lifting hook. So again, there'll be some more part pulling on this engine in the future, but we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. The goal is to get the Caddy bay prepped and swapped, and then get the engine in. Well, that'll about do it for this video, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and hit the little bell to get notifications when we post new videos. And we'll see you on the next one, where we carry on with the Caddy project.